Tonight, Toronto police launch a new registry to help deal with people in crisis.
If we have this information available to us, it gives us a little more background about, okay, this is why this individual is feeling this way.
A positive step forward or a slippery slope when it comes to people's privacy. Plus,
so now the challenge begins of doing something that I think makes eminent good sense, is fair, is reasonable.
Toronto homeowners are about to see their property tax bill go up. We'll tell you how much and why. And a special flight for a special group of kids featuring a special guest. We'll take you aboard the 15th annual Santa Claus flight. Good evening, I'm Mike Wise. Imagine being a police officer, showing up at an address and finding a person in distress, not knowing what's wrong with them or how best to help. Toronto police are trying to address that with the new registry of people at risk. It's being endorsed by many parents of autistic children. But as Kelda tells us, others worry it poses a privacy risk.
Faith Munoz is a stay-at-home mom of a 7-year-old son with autism.
He's a happy little boy. He's very active.
More than once, he's given his parents quite the scare.
He's run away twice already out of school property, and it was a bit concerning in regards of when we got the call and like, is he safe? And who found him.
That's why she's glad Toronto police are launching a vulnerable persons registry. The database allows Munoz to submit personal information about her son, giving officers insight into how best to engage with him if he ever goes missing again.
I'd like them to be aware about his triggers or things that might lessen the anxiety when they approach him. For example, the lights that they might actually bother his eyes. Also the way that they ask him the questions or the type of questions they ask him, because he might not be able to answer direct questions of like, what's your name or who are you? But if they change it in a different way, he might be able to give them that information. It's just rephrasing those questions differently.
Toronto police say the registry would be particularly helpful during what they call unknown trouble.
Someone's throwing furniture around. We don't know what's going on. We walk in the door and we see something, a behavior being exhibited that we have no real context for or understanding of. So we have to react, pretty quickly to whatever we're seeing. But if we have this information available to us, it gives us a little more background about, okay, this is why this individual is feeling this way.
But lawyer Mohammed El Rashidi says while the intentions may be good, it comes with a big risk.
So if you have a breach, that's a very quick way to identify people. And I would imagine a great deal of people don't want to be identified as vulnerable persons or persons with disabilities, let alone all the other information that will be attached to that profile. In some cases with a photo.
And you know that they worked with the privacy commissioner to develop it, and I think that because it's not a mandatory registry, it should hopefully mitigate a bunch of those concerns. But it was done in a way that's meant to really empower and encourage families to take ownership and feel that the information that they want officers to have is at their discretion.
I think it opens the opportunity for better ways to educate both the public, educate the police, educate even people with disabilities to work together.
Police say once submitted, the information will remain in their database for 2 years unless the person who provided it asks that it be removed. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
A 2-year-old girl is in hospital with serious injuries tonight after a police standoff in Hamilton. This started when a woman fled to a neighbor's home with her 2 young children.
I come down and there's, in my living room standing there is a female with a bloody covered baby covered in cuts and another child, and she's screaming for me to call 911.
Police say that 911 call came in around 3:30. When they arrived, they found a 16-year-old boy who'd barricaded himself inside a home. Police believe he may have killed the family dog. Now, 8 hours later, tactical officers made their way in to arrest him. He was taken to hospital for examination. Police say he is known to the family of that injured girl. She was rushed to hospital and is now in stable condition. It's not clear what caused her injuries. There's no word on charges at this hour. Well, it is back to school tomorrow for Ontario public high school students. They got to stay home today as their teachers staged a one-day strike. But as they return to the classrooms, many are questioning just how long it'll be before the next job action by this or another teacher union. Natalie Nanowski has more.
even though their high school was closed, these grade 12 students showed up to join their teachers on the picket line.
Definitely pretty frustrating. I'm involved in a lot of extracurriculars, so in the future, like if they are on strike later in the year, it won't be a good way to end off my grade 12 year.
We just want them to get it sorted out, and hopefully the teachers get what they need and deserve.
What public high school teachers are asking for? No increase to class sizes, no e-learning courses. The government wants to mandate 2 per year and a pay increase of 2% to match the rate of inflation. Members of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation have been without a contract since August and say the government's proposals jeopardize the education system.
And while they may have reduced those cuts, the fact is there are cuts in place already, and they have more cuts on the way, and we are not going to accept cuts.
Also protesting, support staff like speech pathologists and psychologists. They say earlier budget cuts mean they're now covering more schools with fewer resources.
Here in the TDSB, we lost 10 psychology staff members, which is massively significant to supporting young people who have learning disabilities and other challenges in the system.
Though Catholic high schools remained open today, those teachers fear they could be walking out next.
We have filed for conciliation and for a no board report, so we will be in a similar position to OSSTF in about 17 days or so.
At Queen's Park, the education minister called on the OSSTF to come up with a better proposal.
Every time our government has made significant, reasonable proposals in good faith to the OSSTF, not only have they rejected our proposals, but actually neglected to advance any new proposals since the first day our bargaining commenced. Mr. Speaker, you can't have it both ways.
There was no framework that he claimed. There was no request that we look at creative solutions. If we start making concessions, understand that those are concessions in the quality of education, and my members have told me clearly they're not interested in compromising the quality of education, and I don't think the public wants us to.
So you heard it right there. It looks like there is a stalemate. No word yet on when the two sides will be back at the bargaining table, but the union does tell CBC that it is preparing for more strikes if the government doesn't make a move soon. Natalie Danowski, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy's here with a first look at the forecast. A breezy start to tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it is going to be just a little bit breezy. That's right, Mike. And because of that, it means with our temperatures already a little cool, it's going to feel kind of chilly, almost like -10. Not quite, but bordering on that. Today's daytime highs, well, it didn't last long, but we did get rounded up to 3 degrees, which is seasonal for this time of year. But it was kind of short-lived. And we spent much of the afternoon with that temperature closer to 2. And looking at some of the snow squall activity, certainly more significant stuff back towards Mount Forest and into the Dundalk Highlands there. But even some of these wet flurries, of course, you get into a bit of a mix the closer you get towards the lake. But that carrying on into the evening and overnight hours, and then even tomorrow morning, that potential. Some areas will get some sunny breaks in here, but there'll still be a bit of wet flurry activity around with some of those winds driving in from the northwest. And then we should get into some sunny breaks, maybe even a few areas getting a little more sun than that as we go into Thursday afternoon. Thursday night, though, into Friday morning, the next system is going to move through. So I'm going to talk about this one and the snowfall amounts in a little more detail coming up. Just know that we'll have a low of -2, feeling like -9 overnight tonight. Tomorrow afternoon, 0. That's what we'll do. Freezing for our afternoon high, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Toronto homeowners could be looking at a larger than expected property tax increase next year and for a few years after that. Mayor Tory says he is backing a plan to increase the city building fund to help pay for transit infrastructure and affordable housing. Greg Ross has details on how much it could cost you come tax time.
The mayor made the announcement this morning during a planned speech at the Canadian Club.
These are crucial social priorities, but they're also crucial economic priorities.
He says maintaining the current infrastructure of Toronto's transit system and continuing to build affordable housing is going to cost about $6.6 billion. In order to get that money, Tory is proposing increasing the annual levy to the city's building fund by a total of 10.5% over the next 6 years.
If we don't make these investments, the one thing I can promise people for sure is that this city will not be able to maintain the incredible success we've had in the last 5 or so years as a magnet for investment in smart people. The city will start to strangle itself on things like congestion. We won't achieve our environmental objectives, and people will not have an adequate, affordable place to live.
Tory says the average homeowner will pay an additional $43 in property taxes next year. He believes he has enough support in City Council to push the motion. But those opposed, like Ward 2 Councillor Stephen Holliday, say it's not fair to force property owners to foot the bill.
We know the cost of living in the City of Toronto is very expensive. People talk to me about it. It's not just the property tax, but it's other layers that go on it, like these special levies and like the user fees that we charge for water and for solid waste pickup that always seem to be going up and up and up.
The proposal also flies in the face of a long-standing promise from the mayor.
I am committed to bringing in a budget that contains a property tax increase at or below the rate of inflation.
Going back on that promise wasn't sitting well with many homeowners today.
When you hear about an increase in property taxes, what goes through your mind?
It's not something I want to hear.
Frustration is the basic thing that goes through my mind.
He had promised to stay within the rate of inflation, and now he's going beyond it. I think that may, affect Torontonians' trust.
Tory says the onus is now on him to convince Torontonians that it's the right thing to do.
So now the challenge begins of doing something that I think makes eminent good sense, is fair, is reasonable, to sell that to people and to have them understand.
Tory will introduce the motion to increase property taxes later this month. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, it's not just property taxes. The cost of groceries is also set to rise. We'll tell you why you may be paying hundreds more next year. Coming up after the break. Get ready to shell out more at the grocery store next year. Canada's annual food price report is predicting a big hike in food costs for 2020.
The average Canadian family to spend $487 more this year compared to last year to buy the same amount of food, the same type of food, which is actually quite substantial.
The report cites climate change as a big reason for the rising prices. It says unexpected snowstorms, droughts, and other weather events have affected crops and will therefore affect food prices. And that includes cost of produce and meat. The report is released jointly by Dalhousie University and the University of Guelph. Predictions are made using historical data, algorithms, and predictive analytical tools. And as food prices go up, so does the need for having food banks. You can do your part this holiday season by donating to our annual Sounds of the Season fundraiser with Daily Bread Food Bank. In just a few days, Friday, in fact, CBC Toronto is hosting an open house in support of all food banks across the GTA. There'll be live performances, musical guests, and events right here at the Broadcast Centre. So come on down and please bring a donation. So far, you've helped CBC Toronto raise more than $47,800 for the Daily Bread Food Bank. It's all part of our Sounds of the Season fundraiser. Well, Ontario's climate plan came into some harsh criticism today. The Auditor General released her annual report where she found the government's plan for carbon emissions, well, it was full of holes. Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the details.
It's the biggest Auditor General report Ontario has ever seen. 1,200 pages detailing the flaws in provincial programs. A key focus this year, the Ford government's environment plan. The plan lays out how the province intends to cut greenhouse gas emissions. The numbers, though, are simply not realistic, according to the auditor's probe.
The initiatives identified in the plan by the ministry that could further reduce greenhouse gas emissions are not yet supported by sound evidence.
Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk says unless the government strengthens its measures, it won't meet its own climate change targets.
They need to look for more ways to reduce the emissions.
Not so long ago, the Ford government was touting its environment plan.
Holding the biggest polluters accountable, reducing trash, and keeping our lakes clean.
Now, the environment minister is left struggling to defend it.
We have a plan. The Auditor General didn't say it was terrible. She said it needed to be tightened up. We totally agree with that.
The federal government is charging you a carbon tax. You're paying a nickel more per liter.
The auditor also revealed today that this Ford government ad campaign, paid with your provincial tax dollars, cost $4 million. The auditor criticizes it as a partisan use of public funds.
We have no confidence whatsoever that this government is serious about climate change.
The climate change plan isn't the only thing the auditor examined in today's report. She investigated food in long-term care homes. She found residents are getting fed nearly twice as much sugar as recommended and not enough fiber. At one nursing home, the auditor's team found liquid eggs 3 months past their best before date. The report reveals nearly 70,000 patients each year are harmed in some way during their hospital stays. And the auditor shows a steep drop in safety inspections of commercial vehicles on Ontario's roads. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And the Maple Leafs taking on the Avalanche at home tonight with Mitch Marner back in the lineup. We'll have game highlights coming up.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Some familiar faces back at the Scotiabank Arena tonight. Mitch Marner returning to the lineup after his ankle sprain. And Nazem Kadri playing here for the first time since being traded to Colorado last year. He got a standing ovation and the Leafs played a video tribute to him during the first period. He was on the ice as Nathan McKinnon opened the scoring, ripping it past Frederik Andersen to make it 1-0. Now, shortly after, though, Alexander Kerfoot had a great no-look backhand pass. Zach Hyman's there to redirect it to tie the game. Third period, though, Valerie Nichushkin with a breakaway and then a short-handed goal. Leafs would go on to lose 3-1. Colette is back with her extended forecast. I don't know how to read weather radar that much, but that looked like a pretty large snowstorm hitting our city later this week.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. It looks a little more intense, perhaps, on our weather models and radar than what it is going to necessarily be when it gets here. We are looking, though, at some light accumulation. So I want to kind of walk you through that, especially when it's going to have the biggest impact. Still a few wet flurries into tonight and into tomorrow morning, by the way, but it's by Friday morning that we'll be seeing some light snow coming through. So that's the portion, likely that morning commute Friday, that will be impacted. But I got to give you something good in here, and that's not the first half of the weekend, so not Saturday, but for Sunday, we'll see the temperatures rising up a little bit. And I can recap that our average high at this time of year, 3 degrees, and our average low, by the way, minus 4.4. Yesterday, the record low came from 1940, and it was minus 24 and change, and 1940 had a string of cold days, minus 25, the record there. So we can count ourselves as kind of lucky. We're nowhere near that. Some of those squalls due to the stronger northwesterly winds, so they're providing that fetch across the water. So there have been some areas that are looking at more significant amounts back to the northwest of the GTA, Kincardine area through the Highlands, where we're talking about maybe seeing those amounts being closer to 10 centimeters or even more, very highly localized, but still that risk there. Some of the wet flurries tomorrow morning still making their way down into the city and beyond. Then things should improve into the afternoon hours, and we'll probably start to see sunny breaks too, it becoming a mix of sun and cloud. The winds will begin to ease as well. But what starts to come into our picture here as we go later into Thursday, see how quickly this system is going to move. So Thursday into Friday morning, that's where we'll see the biggest impact from it in terms of our roadways and what will be happening. Right now, it looks like about 1 to 3 centimeters of snowfall, but moving so quickly, it's an Alberta clipper, clips through, goes quick, and so it can't leave a whole bunch of snow, and that's going to be moving out of here. So later Friday, we'll actually get into some clearings for the second half of the day. Wet flurries for southwestern Ontario, clearing up through the overnight, -1 the overnight low, but feeling colder than that. 2 to 3 degrees other than London, about 1 for tomorrow into the afternoon hours. And those winds blowing, so there you go, wind chill -9 overnight through the GTA tomorrow. Not as mild, if you can call it mild, as today. Those temperatures are running below seasonal, and we finally get into a little warm up, but we wait till the end of the weekend to find that. So Sunday into Monday, the temperature rises as the system comes through, but it's bringing some rain showers with it, Mike. We take the good with the bad.
We certainly do. And an Alberta clipper on Friday. So that's why it didn't look as scary as you said it was.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'll leave to
Clips
reading the
right
maps
through.
to you. Yeah, okay, thanks a lot, Colin.
You're welcome, Mike.
Coming in. 9202, you have been cleared to the North Pole. Your discretion, Central awaits.
No way. Well, they're making a list and checking it twice, and it's not just the cockpit safety procedures. We'll take you on board a special flight to find St. Nick. That's after the break. It's that time of year kids across the world are riding to the North Pole with their wish list for Christmas. But a special group of them got up close and personal with Santa today. The 15th annual Air Transit and Children's Wish Foundation flight took off from Pearson Airport this afternoon. Our camera went along with them.
Well, today is an absolutely magical day. Air Transat every single year for the past 14 years has been doing this Children's Wish Foundation flight. It's basically taking our little angels, our little passengers that we love most and dear, and we take them up in the sky in search of the North Pole to find Santa Claus.
This is a day for the kids to be kids, and I'm going to get emotional for them to enjoy not being at the hospital, not being poked by a needle, not having chemo, not having radiation. It's a chance for them to be a kid with their families. Since 2004, in which time Air Transat has donated over $6 million. So the average cost of a wish is $10,000. That's a lot of wishes they've helped us to grant.
Coming in. 9202, you have been cleared to the North Pole. Your discretion, Santa awaits.
No way.
He wants the kids to enjoy themselves, have a great time. Don't forget to look out the window. Santa's watching.
Today, we going to the North Pole. That's our mission.
Hi, buddy. Hi. How are you? Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
I always tell people my gimmick or whatever is I blow bubbles and then I say, I want you to pop the bubble and hold it to your heart, but don't tell me your wish because only Santa can make it come true. And a mom approached me and said, my child is blind. Can you have him reach his hand? So I was like so touched by that I actually approached the kid and I was like, hi, my name is Bubbles. I said, you know, Mama tells me you're so special. I want you to hold out your hands. I'm gonna blow bubbles and you'll feel the magic of these bubbles on your hand and just pop them. And that I think has been one of the most epic moments of my career as an elf at Transat. So, did you record that?
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing it.
That was, yeah, by far the most special moment.
Thanks for sharing that moment. Always a great tradition this time of year. Before we go, we have lots planned for Metro Morning tomorrow. It's Matt Galloway's penultimate show, and he'll be joined by a number of guests looking back on the many ways the city has changed over the 10 years Matt has been behind the microphone. Of course, Friday, he'll be live at the Glenn Gould studio for his final broadcast as part of our Sounds of the Season day of programming. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.